And in other news, Asia's economic outlook is facing a growing risk from the ongoing negotiations in West Asia. According to the International Monetary Fund, the region is more vulnerable to an energy shock than others due to its heavy reliance on fuel imports from the Gulf.
The region is highly energy intensive, and you can see that in the chart on the left-hand side. The use of oil and gas amounts to about 4% of GDP for the region as a whole, although there is variation across countries. Now, this 4% which I talked about is nearly double Europe's share. And there's a lot of heterogeneity. For example, oil and gas use exceeds 10% in Malaysia and Thailand, but it's only 2% in Australia and New Zealand. Second, limited domestic production means that this high energy intensity translates into import dependence. Altogether, net oil and gas imports amount to about 2.5% of GDP for the region, rising to about 8% for some economies such as Singapore and Thailand.
Now, despite these risks, Asia entered 2026 on relatively strong footing. Lower than expected US tariffs, a robust global technology cycle, and loose financial conditions have supported growth across the region. These factors have helped offset the immediate impact of rising energy prices, allowing the IMF to keep its growth forecast for Asia broadly unchanged from its January outlook. IMF also called for greater economic integration.
Integration within Asia is limited because many countries in Asia use non-tariff barriers. Now, this could be a wake-up call. This could be a way for countries in Asia to trade more with each other, reduce non-tariff barriers and increase trade integration. So this is something which we've been calling for in the past, and this shock in some sense also kind of underscores the need to diversify your trading partners and so on. And so greater integration is something which we would call for.
However, the outlook remains fragile. The IMF warns that any prolonged war in the Gulf could lead to supply shortages and sustained high energy prices, posing a direct threat to growth. The region's resilience will ultimately depend on how long the conflict persists and how severely it impacts global energy flows.
There's considerable forecast uncertainty. In our reference scenario, it's a relatively moderate, short-lived shock, mainly in the first half of the year, and then it will subside in the second half. But then we have adverse scenarios. As Krishna mentioned, the adverse scenario is just the oil price mostly higher throughout 2026, and in the severe scenario, the oil price will stay high into 27. That clearly would change the picture in Korea and elsewhere in Asia, but our view is it's too early to tell how this oil shock will play out.